Hello, all you followers of American Partisan, all you wonderful gentlemen that go to the G Camp and other such places like out Arkansas. It's going to have a class real soon, Signal Intelligence. A couple of my buddies are going out there to hang out. I'm here by myself. We are going to probably have Mr. Patriot Man here this weekend. I hope to have this out. Happy belated 4th of July, or Rebel Against the British Day, however you want to call it. Well, there's a bunch of stuff going on in the news. There are complex attacks being put out against the ICE police force, and I want to continue on a little project that I haven't gotten very far in, and that's because Teddy has done a phenomenal job reading books to you guys if you listen to him. That said, we stopped on page 26 of the Gorilla's Guide to the Baofeng Radio by my good friend and confidant and the head of the Bossy Oak Militia, Brushbeater, also known as NC Scout. He's got a company open that I've talked about numerous times. I cannot wait to talk to you guys about the Kyber optics more. They're already out there in people's hands. You can go buy them right now. The red dot's phenomenal, and the Japanese glass really works well with a hardened body. I like the form factor. It may not be your bit, but with the red and green optics, and like he said, some people have astigmatism, some people have issues with their eyes. They're going to have etched reticles out. They had some of the preview models when I was up there. They're a phenomenal piece of equipment. But with that said, and like I said, very extreme leftists, obviously there were a whole bunch of white people attacking an ICE compound, setting off fireworks, distracting people, and then shooting cops. If you didn't read my article on, I want to say Bloody Kansas, it could be Bloody Missouri, a whole bunch of different names for that little era before the Civil War, I highly recommend that. I absolutely know that Scout has posted over and over again about this stuff and how this is going to devolve. And if you're not paying attention to the political side, you're kind of behind the curve. And to be fair, I'm generally behind the curve by several hours on this subject like this. What I do want to do is I do want to get some of you prepared. And because NC Scout has been so kind to let me read this stuff, I want to go over something that has been important to me. I just wrote an article on that should draw more attention than it really is. And this came from talking to a historian at the HF class. This also came from a lot of just watching people set up comms, set up security, and everything else. But your core communications that you need to be dealing with is going to start on page 33. The rest of the stuff that I skipped is basically how to set the Baofeng. If you don't know how to do it, it's in the book. I'm not going to waste my time reading every single section on there. There's valid points to it all. And he also talks about in this book how to set it up for digital, which is even more important. But let's start off with the basics. The reason why I bring this up is the British had a hell of a time getting German decryption when the Germans followed their communications plan. What happened a lot of times, though, is they didn't follow their communications plan, and we end up breaking their codes. Also, the same thing with Japan. Now, Germany, in their high-fluting mentality, believed that they could do no wrong, and the Enigma machine was unbreakable. Theoretically, it probably was if they hadn't been so weak sauce with a lot of their stuff, and the British were very lucky, along with Americans, capturing some of their code books. Without a good SOI plan, your signals and plan and your pace plans, you are going to be shit out of luck. You are going to be compromised. And I'm going to tell you this right now. Believe you're compromised from day one. Don't say anything on the radio that you wouldn't want to say on the internet and be recorded if you can possibly help it. Now, that's not always possible. Maybe things have gone sideways in your area. Maybe you live in California and they said, we're going to go communist. Well, more likely New York at this point. New York City, at least. And who knows? Maybe those crazy Escape from New York and I think Escape from LA, maybe those movies are going to be more real than I want them to be. But let's start reading this section, and I'm going to give some briefs on it as we go along. This is on page 33. It is Chapter 3, Communications Planning. in your spiral notebook. If you have the big one, I think it's the same page, but don't quote me. But it is your Chapter 3 Communications Planning. Proper communication techniques first relies on the ability to plan. We call this the Signals Operating Instructions, SOI. The SOI is a type of chart that logically lays out a group's communication in an easy-to-follow way between teams operating in a given area and the headquarters, known as your Tactical Operations Center, TOC, coordinating their activities. The SOI includes multiple layers: the frequency tables themselves, the call signs used by individual teams, passwords, and a simple encryption grid for authentication of transmissions, known as a Search and Rescue Numerical Encryption Grid, SARNEG for short. Each of these layers and higher degrees of communication security. One of the biggest failures of the global war on terror was mostly abandoning these methods with the excuses of digital encryption and expediency in lieu of proper tradecraft and sound techniques. Both have led to severe complacency in the face of possible technologically superior adversary. If it is your turn to be the guerrilla, the entire way of thinking must return to the practices perfected during the Cold War. The SOI is, along with the planned route, the most sensitive part of a group's operations plan. It is trashed after each mission, and SOI is not to be reused. Units tasked with unconventional warfare in Vietnam had multiple sets of frequencies per mission in recognition that the Viet Cong and the NVA had significant levels of technology dedicated to intercepting them. The SF Patrol Tips Guide B-52 suggested certain practices for teams operating for extended periods in the jungle, and those suggestions had been refined into the simple SOI flowchart below. The SOI includes the PACE plan, a frequency set, each labeled with their own code word. The primary and alternate frequency set have a transmitting TX and receiving RX frequency. On the Baofeng, this is simply done by ensuring the radio is first in the frequency mode, then transmit. Dual receive TDR, menu number 7, is enabled. The transmitting frequency is entered in the top, and the receive frequency is entered on the bottom. This is reversed for the other group and creates a frequency set. When operating this way, an adversary must identify both frequencies in the set in order to intercept the entire transmission. While not impossible by any means, this adds a layer of protection. The mode is also identified in the case a method other than voice, such as digital mode, for a data burst, is being used. If it is simple voice, label it as voice. The second half of the SOI, the call sign, password, SARNEG, and comms window, provides instructions on how and when to communicate, both over the radio and in person. It's a simple, logical way for a team to map out capabilities, and it is a critical part of the mission planning process. At the conclusion of the guerrilla operation, the entire plan is scrubbed, never to be used again. Intelligent collectors and analysts tasked with counter-guerrilla operations put an emphasis, pattern recognition, and recovering an SOI is considered a jackpot. For the reason the SOI also laid out in a manner it is, so that even in the presence of more sophisticated equipment and capabilities, the underlying tradecraft in the technique are sound, make life difficult for the enemy, do not fall into the trap of thinking because one plan worked at a given point of time, it will then become the default plan for all future operations. Complicity kills. While sustainment communication considerations may get away with this, tactical and clandestine level communications absolutely cannot. I'm going to go into more of this, but I kind of want to explain what you're seeing on this page. We've got page 35 has the sample SOI chart, and it's got signal operations instruction, and it has duration, which is your comms window. This is extremely important. This can't be for days and days and days. If you are going to do a comms window for HF, my suggestion is to set up your comms window for disasters and possible future issues that you're talking to loved ones in long range. Set up comm windows for a certain period of time where you will transmit and they will receive, and you want to have a moving frequency and you want to have a playbook built with these things for specific times. The World War II side of things also had a, hey, I'm going to be listening all the time for these guys. And if you do an emergency transmission, like you might have heard behind me, it is imperative that we do certain specific tasks in a certain way. This is not something I'm going to go over in detail on here, but it's something to think about. So, we've got the duration. We talked about that. Frequency, primary frequency and mode, which is the P and pace. You're going to put in that frequency, like you said, and you're going to put in the mode. So if I'm doing digital, what digital is it? Is it Olivia? Is it this? Is it that? You're also going to use a code word for that frequency. And then you're going to have your transmission frequency and your receive frequency. The code word is paramount. The reason why you use this code word is if you have to change frequencies or change to an alternate part in your pace plan, you have a word to use.
So as we continue, we go to the alt frequency, same setup as the primary frequencies. This is in case you have any interference or you can't quite get somebody in HF. You might be on 80 meters, maybe you need to go to 40 meters, stuff like that. The next one's going to be your contingency frequency, and that is going to be just a straight frequency that doesn't have a send and receive transmission. Generally speaking, they don't have a code word for it. Some of the SOIs do. I think Scout left it out for smart reasons. And then you have the emergency signal, which is something that you would put out in view for, say, a helicopter pickup, such as it is. From the clandestine side of things, people used to put advertisements in newspapers and stuff like that. There's alternatives to that now. The Mossad apparently has used video games like Roblox and stuff like that to chat in. So, we move on from that, and there's call signs. Call signs are essentially a way to say, you, this is me, and to prevent enemy forces from figuring out exactly who you are every time. Now, there are ways to figure out who you are. If you do CW and you use your hand, you're going to leave a signature. That happened in World War II. People figured out who this person was by that. They nicknamed him the whole shebang. Obviously, voice I can record. You can hear my voice. If you met me walking down the road, you would hear my voice and go, oh, gee, what are you doing here? So there's that too. That's part of the reason why digital is so important. And that's probably an aspect we will go into more, and I've brought up numerous times before. But it's an element of obfuscation, because even if you hear my voice, maybe I've changed my call sign, you don't know if I'm at the TOC, am I a mobile element, am I a recovery, etc. And that's part of where the rest of this SOI goes to. All your call signs and then your challenge and password. The famous one is Flash Thunder from World War II, the invading forces, the airdrop. And then you have running passwords, which might be speedball or something like that. Who knows? Pick a random word, Budweiser, and that will be your random password. So if I'm running towards you and you're an ally, and you point a gun at me and I start screaming, Budweiser, 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 you know who I am. And I might say with that, Budweiser 5, which means there are 5 of us coming towards your line who are friendly. Now, that doesn't mean drop your weapons. Generally, if we're running from something, and I may be in duress, which is also something you have to pay attention to. There's also a number combination. I'm not going to go into that now. It's basically doing math games. But the search and rescue, the Sarnig. So in the article, I talked about the Dryad system and Petco, which are encryption of similar techniques, and they were paper encryption for in the field in case digital encryption went down. And it was mostly used to verify something or to put coordinates in. And that's something to really pay attention to on this. You may need it for duress or an authentication. Maybe somebody comes on, records your voice. AI is really good now. They can record my voice and have me say whatever they want them to. Like, God forbid somebody clips this and hears me go, communism is the best thing ever invented. If you hear that somewhere else and it's not on this particular podcast and I'm not making a complete idiotic joke, it's a lie. Or I'm under duress. One of the two. So, the first number of the Sarnag is going to rotate with the last number based on dates normally. So that's a way to alternate the numbers, and you should be alternating your Sarnag word, which he has Kingfather in here, and you can't have repeating letters. It's got to be 10 letters long. There's a whole bunch of them out there. You can find them real easy. Now, let's talk about comms windows. Comms windows for Dryad and Betco were 6 hours, and you may have to do that for extended periods of time, especially if you're communicating a whole bunch. If you're communicating less, maybe you want to make that time window more, but your communications in that time window might be extremely infrequent, maybe once, maybe twice, and that's it. That's something you'll have to figure out. So that's the basics of the PACE plan. We're on page 36 right now. PACE plan. PACE stands for Primary, Alternate, Contingency, and Emergency, and is a 4-layered approach to every aspect of planning a mission. From route selection, support equipment, to communications, having 4 options in the field are critical, not just as capabilities approach, but also for communications, security, and a team survival during personal recovery phase of an operation, PR. The role of each layer of PACE plan. Primary method of communication. Alternate. Used if primary is no longer functional. Contingency. Initiates personal recovery plan. Emergency. Non-electrical. Near or far recognition for link up. Could be a flashlight. Could be a glow stick. Could be a flag on a thing. Page 37. Primary and alternative are essentially interchangeable. Both of these have the transmission and receive frequencies listed along with the mode of operation. If it's voice, it will be marked voice for digital identifies which digital protocol. He has in here MT63, DMR, Thor, etc. There could be a wide variety of reasons for communication failures during a mission that are completely outside a team's control. Out of range, changing environmental conditions, or electronic warfare by a sophisticated enemy. And they don't have to be that sophisticated anymore to be doing electronic warfare. See South Africa. Continuing on. This is resolved by switching to a new frequency or set. Primary and alternative frequency sets are assigned a code word. Teams indicate switching between the frequencies set by simply saying the code word to initiate the change. Example, alternate frequency set is assigned with code word Alice. Wolf, this is Hound, over. Hound, this is Wolf. Alice, Roger. Group enters new frequency set. I'm going to pause right here, half page. I'm going to say this. I think the Marine Corps has done a big injustice on not publishing some of their concepts to other people. I would super abbreviate this. It'd be, instead of Wolf, this is Hound, over. It'd be Wolf, Hound, over. And then, if, depending on how your frequency is set up, you may just say go, which means I'm hearing you. Or go for Hound. Alice, Roger, boom. We spend a lot of time making words on radios when we initially get into it, and you start cutting things down. And this is true in the hobby of amateur radio as well. If you talk to anybody, they'll say 73s, which is basically goodbye, good luck. There's a couple words that are added to that. And it was in a short abbreviation that was done in Morse code to just say, hey, have a nice day. I think I can't remember, there's one 68 or 86 is like hugs and kisses, whatever. Kind of cringy. You don't hear that, but it's part of that whole coding system. And it's not something secret. It's something everybody knows generally once you get into it. But it's just a shorthand of like, hey, thanks, talk to you later, or have a great day. That's the emotional aspect of 73s. Now, I think we do too much in the communication industry to use too much verbiage. Hell, I talk too much on this damn thing. That said, I think his version on here makes a lot more sense. If you get into radios, learn how to shorten it. Learn how to shorten it with your community. The less you say, the more safety you have. All right, continuing on. In the event both primary and alternate frequency sets fail, the mission objective changes. History being a consistent guide, a failure in communication will lead to the team getting killed. The mission then changes to extraction and personal recovery, PR. Contingency is the frequency set aside for PR and is assigned a unique code word so that minimal instructions are required over the net. Anyone familiar with civil aviation instantly knows Mayday, which is probably the best known example. Said 3 times on a specific frequency, 121.5, which do not turn and do not initiate signals on that. The U.S. government and a whole bunch of foreign entities track that for safety reasons with satellites. It immediately triggers a recovery and rescue effort. This is labeled as the running password or duress word in the SOI and works the exact same way. So there you go. That's why I didn't add a code word for that, and other places do. So your duress word is that word. When planning missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, teams would always have a contingency frequency, which was also labeled the medical evacuation frequency, which was a single channel rather than frequency hopping and unencrypted. We did this for absolute reliability when lives are on the line, for the reason the contingency line of the SOI must also be a single frequency. Traffic on this frequency is kept to a minimum as well. The team is under fire or has been compromised. We will be linking up at the pre-planned site for our extraction. All this is triggered with a pre-planned code word. Planning again is critical. Emergency is always a electronic signal that is used to signal a team's location to the group coming to rescue them. It includes a day or night signal. There are a large number of ways to do this, but the 2 most common tactical signals are using a VS-17 blaze orange hot pink flag during the day and a colored chem light at night. The signal is used in 2 ways, marking the team's location and sending a signal that they are not being held hostage. To make link up, the team that sees their signal will give a responding signal. This is known as near and far recognition signals. The teams then link up each bona fides, the challenge and the password from the SOI, and return to friendly lines. Call signs. Call signs are a word, number, letters, or some combination thereof to identify the origins of traffic on a network. On the civilian side, call signs are used to identify an individual station through its government-assigned letters and numbers. They are issued to individuals, clubs, and special events for amateur radio, to groups with GMRS, and business and organizations for business band use. We're on page 39 now, and I'll just throw this in. You ever heard of like K9 News, etc.? That's where that comes from. They have a 4-letter call sign for most FM and AM stations, if I remember correctly. Continuing on. There is much personal data attached, including the license holder, the geolocation of the registration, and in case of the amateur radio, the region assigned to the call sign. In the conventional side of the military, call signs are used to indicate the organization and authority level in that organization's hierarchy. For example, when I was assigned to Light Infantry Company early in my career, all the call signs were Apache, designated Alpha Company. There were no other Apache companies in the battalion or brigade. Apache 6 was the company commander, 5 was the executive officer, second in command, 7 was the first sergeant, and 1 through 4 were individual platoon leaders. Apache 1 through 7 would be the platoon sergeant, or 1-7 would be the platoon sergeant, 1-1 the first squad leader, etc. These remained static and did not change, indicating the position of the person's communication on the net. Unconventional warfare and guerrilla operations are a completely different story. Intelligence collectors and analysts map organizations based on hierarchy for the reason every effort must be made to conceal the levels of authority and the actual roles within the organization when communicating. Call signs, when used for communication in a guerrilla warfare, must frequently be changed with each SOI. One technique I recommend is having the call sign follow a theme, each related to one another while leaving little indication of their actual nature and position of authority. The names themselves can be literally anything, but call signs must be assigned to, at a minimum, three distinct roles. The Tactical Operations Center, operating on the authority of the Ground Forces Commander. The Maneuvering Elements teams, conducting the operation. And the Dedicated Personal Recovery and Support element. Again, the words used as call signs themselves are irrelevant. Understanding the role for each covered in the communications brief during the planning phase of an operation is critical, as is making every effort to conceal the role or purpose of the transmission to a potential signals intelligence collector. Passwords, SARNEG, and authentication. Challenge and the accompanying password are used in person only. They are never said over the radio. These serve the purpose of identifying friendlies when linking up in the field. Even if a group knows one another and is very familiar with the group they're joining, a challenge and password becomes a critical way to signal if a link-up is dangerous or not. The way these are passed is one person approaches another from the two groups and states the challenge, followed by the other person stating the password. In World War II, this was the predominant method used by the French and the Danish resistance forces against the Nazi occupation, and has been used by countless underground and clandestine groups ever since. It is a simple way to give one group a head up it is safe to make a link up or not. We call these exchanges bona fides, of bona fides. Using the word in short phrases which, like the call sign, are meaningless by themselves. If the challenge and password is dog and horse, for example, they'd be exchanging the words as, "Excuse me, did you see the lost dog poster? No, I thought they were looking for a horse." Again, these are not to be used over the radio. It is a method for linking up in person only. Should the wrong password be given twice, no further attempts to make a link up should be made, and that group should be considered compromised. Running password. The second type of password is the running password or duress word to indicate a team in distress. When this is used, the TOC commander immediately switches the contingency frequency to coordinate the recovery of the team. This is commonly done in both civil aviation and maritime traffic for aircraft or vessels in distress, using the word Mayday 3 times over the air. Most people are familiar with the method, and it works the same way for small groups, albeit with a different word. SARNEG. The SARNEG is the proper method for authenticating traffic over the air, each letter being assigned a number and the sequence of these numbers rotating daily. Allows for a simple and robust method of authentication over the air. Due to the multiple ways it can be used and the fact that it changes every 24 hours, it can be used over and over for several days duration of a mission. Given the example SOI SARNEG above, King Father, we would contact the receiving station and initiate the contact with their call sign, followed by the authentication code. Hound, this is Wolf, over. Wolf, this is Hound. Authentication Kilo 1, over. I authenticate 0 India, over. So Kilo is assigned a 0 and 1 is assigned India. The station's answering responds with the corresponding number and letters said phonetically over the air. As with the password, if this is incorrectly given twice, the responding station could be indicating that they were being compromised without blatantly giving it away. The SARNEG also has the purpose of encrypting number values during a message. Grids to a location are the most frequent use, but this also applies to the numbers of items as well. A grid square in latitude and longitude, military grid reference system, MGRS, or universal transverse Mercator, UTM, can use this method to replace the numbers with letters which can only be decoded in the given 24-hour time period with the current SARNEG. For example, an MGRS grid, when sent in a report, would look like this. Mike Delta 1552871 encoded would be Mike Delta India Alpha Alpha November Echo Hotel India Romeo. Any information gathered from this is essentially useless when taking into account the first it will change in 24 hours. And second, the enemy would have to have prior knowledge of what is even being transmitted, since there is a significant difference in each of the grid locator methods. If those are even used, the information is mostly useless by the time it is processed by signals intelligence units. Communication windows. During an operation, the two most dangerous times for a group on the ground is during the overt phase of movement, insertion into the operating area, and during extraction. While on the move, all radio equipment that a team has on the patrol is switched on and is being actively monitored in case of emergency contact. Once they move into their planned hide site, patrol base, or safe house, a report is sent up indicating their safe arrival and that they will be checking in at the next pre-planned commo window. Radios are switched off to preserve battery life and mitigate the possibility of accidental transmission from the hide, and the team will only communicate via radio from an area outside of their hide site, known as a transmission site. The further obscures their presence and their techniques for this is covered in Chapter 5. Communication windows, or comm windows, are pre-planned periods of time that teams will check in with the TOC or with other teams in the field. They are typically once every 12 or 24 hours, depending on mission requirements, and are usually 2-hour blocks of time. The actual transmission can be sent anytime during the 2-hour block to further randomize the amount of time on the air. In Afghanistan, we'd regularly have 2 commo windows in a 24-hour period, one for daylight, one for night. If 2 were missed, this would automatically signal something wrong with the team on the ground and trigger the personal recovery plan. A good friend of mine missed 2 in a row during a mission, and this was extremely out of character. We knew something had happened to him and his team. We approached his team's last known location, their hide site overwatch a Taliban-aligned village on the border with Pakistan, and their team, despite their high level of training and discipline, had fallen victim to the cold and the creeping sleep that happens when you get warm in a cave. They slept through the first common window and then did the same for the second. At least they were alive. Communications plans consideration. The method described here are robust in detail and assume a high threat environment. While not necessarily in this detail for sustainment level communications in a tactical or clandestine environment, this degree of planning will become absolutely necessary regardless of level of sophistication and capabilities of an enemy. It requires discipline. Failure to recognize this reality will result in compromise of eventual failure. This is a reminder also that the method for planning an SOI ensure that a group does not fall into the trap of creating a pattern. Changing one's practices regularly stymies and frustrates the effort of predictive analysis hunting you, and in doing so will keep you alive. Now I'm going to stop there. We'll be on page 45 next. I kind of want to comment a little bit about this. So all the stuff that he talks about is stuff that we learned in World War II. And that's the essential makeup of a lot of this technology was in World War I and World War II. World War I kind of started having radio stuff, but not as much as you would see in World War II. World War II had the vehicle-borne radios, the ones in the airplanes, the tanks, etc. And not everything had it, but it was out there enough. This made for a interesting warfare environment, and it up to today, a lot of the technology, while it advances, while we have encrypted voice, a lot of the ways to get after somebody is still the same as in World War II. The methods change, the little tricks and little issues are different, but this is part of the reason why NC Scout and myself do not like mesh network systems. And I'm going to caveat this. A mesh network on your farm or in your small community to mitigate the use of cell phones, etc., for sustainment level stuff is perfectly fine. And if you're wanting to spend the money, that's great. I don't think it's worth it because you can buy enough Baofangs to supply a small army for the price of this technology. and most of it's text-based, so what's the point? The other thing is this stuff constantly transmits. Yeah, and yes, I already can hear the argument full, but I can do this. I can have it encrypted to 256A. Yeah, I got that. The problem that comes down to it is you're still transmitting. And they'll go, well, I'm in this band and it's hidden, and we can also do frequency hopping or whatever else. True, but I can still hunt you down over time. And you're going to be transmitting randomly because the nodes have to communicate with each other. And this also might in line with me figuring out the whole region that you're operating in. And that could be even more damning if I don't come get you and I get your whole network localized. So there's that too. So yes, the Baofeng radios aren't the best radios on the planet. They're effective for what they are. They're easy to get a hold of. They're cheap. They have many accessories. This is the same argument that I made for the Palmetto State Armory Dagger, and that's part of the reason why I wrote an article on that. It is by no means the epitome of all firearms. It's not the best firearm in the world. It's a clone of a Glock, and it is effective for what it is. It takes Glock magazines and Glock accessories for that generation. I think it's Gen 3. So, recognize initially that the more you communicate, and this is why I bring this up, the more you communicate, the more you do, the more you're going to get found. And the more you're found, the more chances you're going to be killed or captured and turned. And the Germans were very good at turning intelligence agencies coming over from Great Britain and resistance fighters in France, Denmark, etc. What happened was it was a combination of new technology, not good enough skills for some operators, and the Germans were extremely good at tracking people down. Now, does that mean that you were in a threatening environment, you shouldn't transmit a radio? No. But you need to learn how to do it, and you need to learn how to do it properly. For those guys that are going to DARC coming this weekend, which will be, I think it's going to be Thursday, or maybe it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in Arkansas near Little Rock, you guys will actually see the back end of this part of the book. And I don't know what Scout gives out there on paperwork, if he gives out anything. The RTO class came with a little flip folder book initially. Nowadays, I think this book is the main progenitor of the knowledge. And it has everything that the little flip book had, plus way more. But seeing the back end of how people hunt you will make you understand why your radio discipline is so important. I've got a buddy coming out there, and he's going to be checking it out, and I can't wait to see how he does. He was in the Scout program out in Missouri, and I'm just tickled pink to see him do his things. I also am going to be doing a small class on area studies, and we're going to be diving deeper into area studies for the area of Arkansas and Missouri with some people that I've talked to on a regular basis. This is all white side stuff, and I'm not doing anything like Sneaky Pete crazy stuff, but it's to help them understand area studies more. If you can't train with your people, if you can't train with your friends, gather knowledge, gather intel, learn this stuff, read these books, talk about them. Liquid Rabbit's not going to be on here this weekend. I'm going to try to get Wisco Mando on with Patriot Man. We're going to try to do our firearms conversation over again. We'll see if that happens Sunday. And then that should be for next week. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, we'll figure out something that we're going to talk about. That said, we may not all be at the G Camp at the same time. We still conversate about this stuff. We're still doing training. I went to historian's class. I brought that information back to Liquid Rabbit. We discussed stuff. He actually came out there that weekend just by happenstance. Not for the class, but to hang out for the grand opening and stuff like that. So, if you can't train, if you haven't met people yet, and I highly recommend you meet people, stick with white side conversations. Do not go into anything. And Clay Martin did a really good book called Prairie Fire. Highly recommend it for everyone. He goes in there And he has some key things that he's like, don't ever talk about. And I say this over and over again. I've heard Joe say it. I'm sure Scout said it multiple times too. But you never talk about the ATF's favorite items, short of firearms. Firearms okay, but the rest of it, just stay off the stuff that the ATF gets really mad about and shoot your dog over. Never talk about that on Whiteside Communications. And you should be looking at everything you do, encryption-wise and all this other stuff, as Whiteside Communications, unless you have handed somebody an OTP and you are doing a message like that. As sophisticated as our intelligence operations are nowadays, as sophisticated as encryption has come and it has like trickled down to us common people, the reality is you never know who can get into stuff. We saw this with Pete Hegseth and all that stuff and the breach of their signals communications. Literally something that I've been told multiple times before this, that, oh, you can't hack it. Maybe. Well, this guy was just added and he shouldn't have been on there. That was their fault. Maybe. I have my questions. I also have my questions on how he'd get on there. Is it feasible that it was an accident? Yes. Was the second release an accident? Reality is anything online that goes through an internet connection is probably more readily hackable by intelligent actors than anyone else. And I'm not talking about government agencies. I'm talking about John and Q public out there. They are capable of getting into your shit. Hell, half of your passwords have probably been leaked. You should be changing your passwords. Anti-Pattern has had a whole discussion on X about this, and it's something to look at. So, while you're thinking about all this stuff, think about your communications. Think about your PACE plans. Think about writing up your PACE plans for your buddies. And that's something I'll probably get to after he goes through the SIGINT course. They're going to come back, and they're going to have a get-together and probably do a little hiking trip and talk about the course and disseminate some of that knowledge to the people around them. Maybe it'll get some people to go to that SIGINT course. I don't think Scout has any issue filling up those courses, but it's there for the reason, and Scout doesn't mind people teaching this stuff as long as they're not trying to poach the business. Like if you're teaching your buddy what you learn in class, I don't think he cares. He seems to be okay with that. What he doesn't want you doing is like trying to start your own business using his information or quote unquote copying his book and reselling it with an AI algorithm. That shit's shady as hell. He wants you to help your community. He wants you to make your community better. Just don't be a shit about it. That said, I'm going to wrap this up. I think I've been talking long enough tonight, and I'm going to try to get this out hopefully in the next day or two. You guys have a great time. Keep your shovels sharp, and please do not randomly transmit with your radio and signal everybody and talk in the open and not change your damn code names, because that's how the Germans figured shit out. That's how the British figured out shit about the Germans. Well, actually, they didn't. The Germans were smart enough to change their shit more often than the British were, and kept them alive longer. It was ultimately for naught, but kept the war going further because of that. So, don't be a loot drop is what I'm saying. You guys have a good night.
Sharpen those shovels, boys, do not despair. endless road in the shadows. There's no turning back.